The phone call shattered the quiet, though I answered out of obligation. On the other end was Emily, the wife of my wife's boss, Daniel, her voice trembling with panic. Daniel had suffered a heart attack while at work with Olivia, my wife. She had immediately called for an ambulance, and now Daniel was in critical condition at the hospital. Emily asked if I could pick up Olivia since she intended to stay with Daniel. I assured her I would and wished Daniel a swift recovery. Daniel had been Olivia's boss for 24 years. She had joined his company fresh out of college and had quickly become his trusted right hand. Over the years, our families had spent plenty of time together, and I had always found him to be a pleasant man. Olivia often spoke highly of him, describing him as a compassionate boss who valued his employees. Originally from France, Daniel was about 10 years older than both Olivia and me, yet he carried himself with an energy and charm that made him stand out wherever he went. I pulled into the hospital's ambulance bay, parked, and made my way inside to ask about Daniel's condition. I introduced myself to the nurse, explaining that I was Olivia's husband and was looking for her. As I waited, I caught bits and pieces of a conversation between two doctors, but their words blurred together, making little sense to me. A few minutes later, Olivia appeared alongside Emily, and as soon as she saw me, she collapsed into my arms. "He's gone, Nathan," she whispered through her tears. "The doctor said it was a heart attack." A wave of shock washed over me. I stood in the hallway, holding both women as they wept. Emily had just lost her husband of 34 years. Their daughter, Sophia, was 3 years older than my own daughter, Grace, and the two resembled each other so much they could have been mistaken for sisters. Daniel had adored Sophia, and I couldn't even begin to imagine how hard this was going to be for her. Just then, one of the EMTs approached and asked if I was Olivia's husband. When I confirmed, he handed me her purse, explaining that she had left it in the ambulance. I thanked him, shook his hand, and took the purse, automatically wrapping the strap around my wrist to keep it from dangling. That's when something inside caught my eye. A bra. I froze, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. That didn't make any sense. I looked again, just to be sure. No mistake. It was definitely a bra. As the women stepped away, still lost in their grief, I found myself standing there, baffled. Then, for the first time that night, I really looked at Olivia. She wasn't wearing a bra. That struck me as strange, especially considering she had just been at the office with Daniel. A nagging thought crept into my mind. This is weird. We stayed at the hospital a little longer before Emily decided to head home. Sophia was returning from university the next day, and Emily wanted to rest before facing what was to come. I drove her back to her house, then took Olivia and myself home. Not a single word passed between us as we walked through the front door. Without hesitation, Olivia went straight to the bathroom and stepped into the shower. 20 minutes later, she emerged and joined me in the living room, her eyes swollen and red from crying. She sank onto the couch, and I left my chair to sit beside her, pulling her into a tight embrace. Her body trembled as she sobbed against me. I wanted to ask her about the bra. The question burned inside me, demanding an answer. But I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Instead, I just held her, letting her cry until she finally whispered that she was exhausted and wanted to go to bed. It was already midnight, so I followed her upstairs, climbing into bed beside her. The next morning, after showering and shaving, I offered to drive Olivia to the office to retrieve her car. The suggestion seemed to knock the breath out of her. She hesitated, inhaled deeply as if steadying herself, then shook her head. Instead, she asked me to take her to Emily's house. The two of them would grab a taxi to the office to collect Daniel's personal belongings before heading to the hospital to complete paperwork and pick up his things. I offered to help, but Olivia refused without a second thought. This actually worked out in my favor. I needed to track down the EMTs from the previous night. I had questions that needed answers. After dropping Olivia off at Emily's house, I drove straight to the hospital. With a little persistence, I was able to find out the names of the emergency doctors and where to locate them. Eventually, I spotted the EMTs on the fire escape. They recognized me right away. I turned to the one who had handed me Olivia's purse the night before. His name tag read Ethan. Looking him straight in the eye, I asked, "Where did the race begin?" He frowned, clearly wary. "What do you mean?" I didn't blink. "Did you pick them up somewhere other than Horizon Group?" Ethan hesitated for just a second before answering. "Yeah, we got the call from the West Seed Hotel." He paused, studying my reaction, then continued. "I think they were together for maybe 15 minutes before the guy suddenly clutched his chest and collapsed, right on top of your wife. She had to shove him off just to reach her phone and call 911. Then she gave him mouth to mouth. By the time we got there, he was barely hanging on. There it was. The truth. No more doubts. No more need for questions. I thanked them both and walked away, feeling their pity like a weight pressing against my back. My mind was racing as I drove home. There was no mistaking it now. Olivia had been with Daniel in that hotel room when he had his heart attack. But how long had this been going on? Then, like a lightning bolt, the realization hit me. Sophia and Grace weren't just a coincidence. They were sisters. Olivia had been sleeping with Daniel for at least 19 years. How had I never seen it before? How had I been so blind? I had let myself believe it was nothing. Those late nights at the office, the occasional business trips, the work parties. How many times had they been together, right under my nose? And Emily, how had she not figured it out? Maybe I was naive, but surely a wife would notice something, especially when the girls looked so much alike. Emily had always been in and out of the office. Olivia dropped by all the time just to say hello. They seemed like close friends. How could she betray Emily like that? When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Olivia's car already parked in the garage. Inside, I found her in the living room, casually sipping a glass of wine as if nothing had happened. But the second she looked up at me, she knew. The expression on my face must have said it all. "What's wrong, dear?" she asked, her voice measured, but there was a flicker of unease behind her eyes. I wanted to stay calm. I tried to stay calm, but the rage burning inside me wouldn't allow it. "How long?" I snapped. My voice was sharp as a knife, cutting through the air. "How long have you been sleeping with him?" "With Daniel." I spat his name like it left a bad taste in my mouth. "He's Grace's father, isn't he?" The wine glass slipped from Olivia's fingers, crashing onto the floor. She shot up from the couch like I had physically struck her. How dare you say something like that?" she shrieked, her voice laced with fury. She came at me, fists clenched, stopping just short of my face, her eyes blazing like fire. If looks could kill, I'd be dead on the spot. But I didn't flinch. I didn't back down. I knew the truth. Lowering my voice to a whisper, I leaned in and hissed, "You can tell me to go to hell, but don't you dare lie to me. If you do, I swear I'll shove those words right back down your throat." In all the years we had been together, 20 years of marriage, plus the time before that, I had never once yelled at Olivia. Never threatened her. And from the look on her face, she knew this wasn't an empty threat. Her mouth opened like she was about to deny it. But then she saw the fire in my eyes, the unwavering certainty in my stance. The lie died on her lips before she could even speak it. She took a step back, as if physically retreating from the truth. I exhaled sharply and dropped onto the couch, ignoring the spilled wine staining the carpet. Then, without emotion, I spoke the words that had been forming in my mind since I left the hospital. "You killed him." Olivia flinched. The stress of all the lies, the deception, combined with the physical exertion, it was too much for his heart. I continued, my voice hollow. "Honestly, I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner, considering how long you two were at it." The moment I saw the devastation on her face, I knew I had struck a nerve. Her fingers twisted together in her lap, her gaze fixed downward. She fidgeted in silence, though it felt like minutes had passed. Realistically, it was probably only 10 seconds. "Oh my God, do you really think I killed him?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't hesitate. "I wonder if Emily thinks the same thing," I said, my words laced with accusation. "Why wouldn't she? Unless she already knew about the two of you." Olivia exhaled slowly, then spoke in a quiet, almost detached voice. "She knew. She's known from almost the very beginning, and she approved of it." I blinked. "What?" "She even joined us sometimes," Olivia admitted, her voice eerily calm. "Especially on business trips. She always told me she thought it was only right, that since I was such an important part of Daniel's success, I deserved to enjoy him too. She was glad I took care of him at work while she took care of him at home." I felt my knees go weak, and this time, it was me who had to sit down. My head spun. So I had been the only one in the dark? I forced myself to speak. "And Grace?" Olivia barely hesitated. "She's known for the last 4 years." I stared at her in disbelief. My own daughter had known, and she was fine with it. "Sophia knew too," Olivia added, laying it all out now. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Well, isn't that just perfect?" My voice was drenched in sarcasm. "So you've all had a good laugh at my expense." Stupid old Nathan, oblivious to the truth. Even my own daughter, his daughter, I guess, she knew and never told me. Damn. This is just wonderful. I couldn't take it. I bolted out of the house, my breath coming fast, my chest tight. I needed air, space, something to clear the storm raging inside me. I ended up at a park, sitting on a bench for hours, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed a couple of times. Olivia. I ignored it. I wasn't ready to hear her voice. I had always thought of myself as a smart guy. But when it came to Olivia, I had been a fool. It had never once crossed my mind that she could be cheating on me. I trusted her completely, blindly. Looking back, I could probably count a dozen signs I had ignored over the years, signs that had been right in front of my face. How could I have been so blind? And now I couldn't help but wonder, was Daniel the only one? Had there been others? The questions clawed at me, relentless, refusing to let go. As the sky darkened, I finally dragged myself off the bench and drove home. When I walked in through the garage, Olivia was exactly where I expected her to be. Curled up in her usual spot in the living room, this time with a cup of tea in her hands. She looked up at me and wordlessly gestured toward the extra cup she had poured. I shook my head. Instead, I went straight to the liquor cabinet, grabbed a bottle of whiskey, and poured myself a generous glass. Then I sat down across from her, the weight of everything pressing down on me. Olivia lowered her gaze to her hands. "I can't even tell you how sorry I am for hurting you," she said softly. "I wasn't in the mood for apologies. Not yet. Not without answers." "I need the whole story," I snapped, my frustration spilling over. "Every damn detail. How could you do this to me? How could you look me in the eye, tell me you love me, and keep this going for years? Did you love me? Did you ever even respect me?" Her head snapped up, her eyes flashing. "Don't you dare doubt my love for you," she shot back, her voice shaking. "I have always loved you. I still love you." She swallowed hard, then added, "But I loved Daniel too." I scoffed. "Yeah. And how does that work?" She leaned forward, desperation creeping into her voice. "Some people think you can only love one person, but I know that's not true. I have enough love for both of you." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay in control. "Keep talking," I ordered. Olivia hesitated, then let out a slow breath before continuing. "I joined the company about a year after it started," she said, her voice quieter now. "Like in any small business, the hours were long, and we became close. It was an exciting time. I remember telling you all about it, about the challenges, about the late nights. After a year of dating you, I took a full-time position there. As the company grew, I became Daniel's right hand. He was a strong leader, but I was the one who kept everything running smoothly. He relied on me completely, and she paused, her voice thick with emotion. I depended on him too. I said nothing, just motioned for her to go on. She sighed. At the same time, things changed between us, outside the office as well as inside. We were professional in front of the staff, but behind closed doors, we grew closer. More than just colleagues. More than just friends. We talked about everything. Work, politics, personal struggles. The more we worked together, the more connected we became. She glanced up at me. He was 34 then. Strong. Handsome. Wavy brown hair. That classic kind of charm you don't see much anymore. And I was 24. Young. Beautiful. Athletic. Long blonde hair. A bitter taste filled my mouth. I didn't need her to paint the picture. I already knew where this was going. The first time we slept together, she hesitated, but then pushed forward. It felt right. It wasn't about lust. It was love. A different kind of love than what I had with you, but love all the same. She swallowed hard. It happened in his office. On a leather couch. After a long day of work. My grip tightened around my glass, the whiskey burning as I swallowed it down. She met my eyes, searching for something. Understanding, maybe. Forgiveness. But I had nothing to give her. Her words stung, but I bit my tongue, forcing myself to stay composed. I never felt guilty, she went on, her voice steady. Not even when we got married. It was never about betrayal. I loved both of you. I didn't want to hurt you. I wanted it all to last. I sat motionless, my anger simmering just beneath the surface, barely restrained. When Daniel realized this wasn't just some fling, he decided to come clean to Emily, Olivia continued. He wanted to be honest with her. She had just given birth to their first child, but that didn't change the way he felt about me. He still wanted to keep a part of his heart for me. She hesitated for a moment, her expression distant as if lost in memory. Emily invited me to spend a weekend with them. She told me she understood. She gave us her blessing. And years later, when I found out I was pregnant, she was the one who guided me through it. She chose how we would handle things, whether the baby was Daniel's or not. Since she and I shared the same blood type, it made certain details easier to hide. And because I was never around when they were together, no one questioned anything. If someone ever noticed how much the girls resembled each other, we'd laugh it off with some clever joke, steering the conversation elsewhere. Olivia's voice grew softer, almost wistful. Emily saw me as a little sister, and in her own way, she was proud of what she called Daniel's second family. But sitting here now, I can finally see the price of it all. I couldn't speak. My mind was spinning. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was just telling me a story, laying out the truth piece by piece, without a hint of apology. When she paused and turned to look at me, waiting for some kind of response, I could only think of one thing to ask. Had she and Daniel ever taken a break from each other after we got married? Or had it continued without pause? Nearly every day? A flicker of confusion crossed her face before she glanced away. Then, after a brief hesitation, she answered, "No. That was such an exciting time in my life. I had two incredible men who loved me, who wanted me. I was always turned on." She exhaled slowly before adding, "When Daniel and I slept together, I made sure to clean up well, just in case you and I had a night together afterward. I didn't want you to notice. Yes, there were times you had leftovers, but I did my best to keep that from happening too often. And I never let you touch me down there after Daniel and I had been together." I let out a sharp breath, barely able to contain my disgust. "How considerate of you," I muttered, the bitterness thick in my voice. Olivia leaned back, shaking her head slightly. "The strange thing is, I never really compared the two of you. You were both great lovers, both kind, both attentive. And you were even about the same height, she said, as if that detail mattered. It wasn't just about sex with Daniel. It was different. It was about who he was, not just what we did together. Hearing that she hadn't just been physically involved with Daniel but had genuinely loved him in the same way she claimed to love me made my stomach churn. On some level, I suppose it was better than her having random affairs with strangers. But the idea that my wife had given her heart to another man, while I lived under the illusion that we shared something sacred, was unbearable. I had spent my life believing in loyalty, in soulmates. And yet, all along, I had been unknowingly sharing her. Olivia set her tea down, watching me closely, as if searching for some kind of reaction. I had none to give. Without a word, I got up, placed the whiskey bottle back in the cabinet, rinsed my glass, and made my way upstairs. I knew I wouldn't be sleeping that night. A few minutes later, she climbed into bed and curled up behind me, but I stayed perfectly still, pretending to be asleep. I couldn't even bring myself to say good night. The next morning, I woke at my usual 5 a.m., went through my daily routine, and left for work without a word. Olivia was still in bed, making no effort to go into Horizon Group. I figured she and Emily had a lot to sort through now that Daniel was gone. That wasn't my concern. I had my own problems to deal with. Work had always been my escape, my sanctuary when life got messy, and I was hoping that would still be the case. I worked as the vice president of sales at Mayoni Pharmaceuticals. Even at 45, I was part of a new generation in the industry, bringing both technical expertise and business acumen to the table. Unlike most sales executives, I was a trained chemist. I didn't just sell products. I understood how they were made and how they worked. In fact, I had played a role in developing one of them, a medication designed to reduce excessive female libido. It was an effective product, and it had made me a lot of money. Between my salary and Olivia's, we had built a very comfortable life. An upscale home in an affluent neighborhood, 2 luxury cars, and vacations that most people could only dream of. If we ended up divorcing, neither of us would struggle financially. And yet, standing in my office that morning, I realized that all the money in the world couldn't fix what had already been broken. That was the first time I truly let the thought of divorce settle in. It had crossed my mind before, but only in passing, clouded by the emotional chaos of Olivia's betrayal. Now, with Grace away at college and nothing tethering us together except the wreckage she had left behind, divorce felt inevitable. Maybe even necessary. I had worked alongside my boss, Benjamin Foster, for 18 years. Before that, I spent 5 years as a chemist at another company, but everything changed when I met Ari at an industry convention. We hit it off right away. He saw something in me that I hadn't considered myself, potential in sales. Turned out he was right. Switching careers was the best move I ever made. Not only did we make a great team, but Ari was also a genuinely good guy, the kind of boss who looked out for his people. Over time, we built a friendship that went beyond just business. He and his wife, Chloe, had been together for nearly 30 years, with 2 grown kids and 5 grandkids to show for it. At 52, he had the energy of someone half his age. Sharp, driven, and unafraid to surround himself with people who knew their stuff. That's how I got here. When I finally told Ari about Olivia's affair and my decision to leave her, he looked genuinely shaken. He asked if I was sure, and I assured him I was. He didn't press for details. He knew I'd talk when I was ready. Without hesitation, he reached into his file cabinet and handed me a business card from the firm that handled the company's legal matters. Ari wasn't just loyal. He trusted the people who earned it, and he believed these lawyers were the best. He told me to take whatever time I needed, but I assured him I wouldn't need much. A few hours here and there, nothing more. I assumed it would be straightforward. We lived in a no-fault state. We had separate retirement accounts. The only major asset to divide was the house, and we could split that without a fight. I thought we'd both want to keep things simple. I couldn't have been more wrong. That night, when I walked through the door, I was met with an unsettling scene. Olivia had dressed up for the occasion, setting the dining table with care. My favorite dish, supreme spaghetti, sat waiting, alongside an expensive bottle of marrow. The effort was clear, but all I could think was, Daniel had been the wine lover, not me. I preferred something stronger. Hard to juggle the details when you're managing two husbands, Olivia joked, her voice light, as if nothing had changed. She prattled on, the same easy-going, bubbly woman I had known for years. I let it play out for a while, but after 10 minutes, I couldn't stomach it anymore. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but firm, the kind of sentence that sends a chill down any spouse's spine. She barely hesitated before snapping back, "No, we don't." Her tone threw me off. I hadn't expected defiance. I took a breath, steadying myself. "I know," I said, keeping my voice low. "I know about Daniel. About everything. Did you really think I would just accept it?" For a fleeting moment, Olivia looked lost, like a kid caught red-handed. But she didn't deny it. She admitted what I already knew, acknowledging the years she had spent tangled up with her boss. She understood how I felt about infidelity. She knew this would break me. And yet, somehow she thought I'd stay. "I was hoping we could talk like adults before you served me divorce papers," I said, working hard to keep my anger in check. Her response was immediate and sharp. "You can do whatever you want, but I'm not giving you a divorce," she declared. "You love me. I love you. I'm not letting you go. I'll fight this every step of the way. You're throwing away the best thing you've ever had, all because of your pride." I opened my mouth, but she cut me off. "Tell me something," she challenged. "Before you found out about Daniel and me, did I ever give you a reason to doubt my love? Did I ever neglect you? Physically, emotionally, mentally, I was there for you. I was your best friend. We had everything. And if you hadn't found out by accident, you would have lived your whole life believing we were perfect. You never would have questioned a thing." My fists clenched under the table. "No," I said coldly. "Because I found out. And now I know the truth. You didn't love me the way you said you did. You shared your body, your life, your heart with another man. And you knew it was wrong, which is why you hid it from me. That's not love. That's a betrayal that lasted 2 decades. "You don't understand," she shouted, her voice thick with frustration. "I loved you both. Daniel understood that. And I kept it from you to protect you, to spare you this pain. And now, you're proving I was right to keep it a secret." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Protect me," I scoffed. "This was never about protecting me. It was about you getting what you wanted, no matter the cost. You made this decision for yourself. No one else. If I had never found out, I would have died thinking my life was perfect. Thinking I was the luckiest man in the world. Hell, you may as well put it on my tombstone. Here lies Nathan Harrison. The biggest fool who ever lived. He thought he had it all, but he never knew his wife had 2 husbands." The funeral and memorial service were held 3 days later, on a Monday. I didn't go. Instead, I stuck to my routine, woke up, went to work, and moved through the day on autopilot. When I got home that evening, Olivia and Grace were in the kitchen, still wearing their funeral attire. I walked up to my daughter, who had come home from college, and tried to hug her. But the moment I reached out, she pulled away, refusing to let me touch her. Without saying a word, she turned her back to me and walked off, tears silently streaming down her face. Olivia placed a gentle hand on my arm and gave a small shake of her head, as if to tell me to leave it alone. Any other time, I might have taken the hint, backed off, and given Grace space. But nothing about this situation was normal anymore. I couldn't take it. Frustration boiled over inside me, and without another word, I stormed upstairs, grabbed some clothes, my toothbrush, and a few essentials, then walked out the door. The second I left, Olivia started calling. My phone lit up over and over, but I ignored every single call, letting them go straight to voicemail. At least Grace was honest about how she felt. Unlike her mother, she didn't pretend everything was fine. She had made up her mind. I was the enemy now, and she was determined to make me pay for it. If her goal was to rip my heart out, she'd done a damn good job. Not only was she not my biological daughter, but now she had made it clear that I was no longer a part of her life. I had assumed the divorce process would be straightforward. We lived in a no-fault state. We both wanted to do right by Grace. Our retirement accounts were separate, and we could split the proceeds from the house. But, as usual, I had completely underestimated the situation. Tuesday morning, I took advantage of my free time and went to the bank. I divided up the bills, her responsibilities and mine, closed our joint credit cards, and opened a new one under my name alone. That same day, I scheduled an appointment with the law firm my boss had recommended. They managed to squeeze me in for a meeting on Thursday. By the time I sat down in the lawyer's office, I hadn't slept in 3 days. And, I swear to God, the man sitting across from me introduced himself as Liam Thompson. I could only hope his legal skills made up for his unfortunate last name. I got straight to the point. I laid out the entire situation, explained my decision to separate as soon as possible, and made it clear that I wanted Daniel's estate to be sued for alimony. If Grace was no longer my child in any way that mattered, then her biological father could be the one to provide for her. "I'm done being a fool," I told Liam. He nodded, saying there shouldn't be an issue filing, but if Olivia fought the divorce, the judge might order mandatory counseling first, which could slow things down. I didn't care. I told him to go ahead with the paperwork. The following Monday, Olivia was served at Horizon Group. My best guess is that it happened right around 10:07 a.m., because at exactly 10:08, our receptionist walked up to my desk and said, "There's an extremely angry Olivia on line 993. For an entire week, I refused to take her calls. Every time she phoned, my secretary sent her straight to voicemail. But I knew I couldn't dodge her forever. Eventually, I told Zoe, our senior secretary, to patch her through the next time she called. The moment I picked up, Olivia unleashed a furious, curse-filled rant. Without saying a word, I hung up. 15 seconds later, she called again. "Don't you dare hang up on me," she shrieked. I hung up anyway. It took a little longer for the third call to come through. This time, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm trying really hard to stay calm," she said. "You won this round. We need to talk." I forced a bright, artificial cheer into my voice. "This is fantastic news. Call my lawyer, Liam Thompson. I'll text you his number. Set up a meeting with him, and while you're at it, you might want to bring your own lawyer. It'll speed things up." The meeting was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, I stayed at a motel nearby, occasionally stopping by the house to mow the lawn, check the mail, and grab a few things I had left behind. The first time Olivia saw me pull into the driveway, she acted like I was the husband she'd been waiting for. She even tried to hug me. I shoved her away and walked straight into the house. "You didn't have to air our dirty laundry for the whole neighborhood to see," I muttered as I passed her. Olivia crossed her arms. "Oh, please. If I'm such a problem, why don't you just divorce me already?" The meeting with the lawyers finally happened on a Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. As always, I let Olivia have the floor first. She looked straight at me and spoke with raw emotion. She told me she had loved me, completely and without reservation, and that Daniel had only occupied a small corner of her heart. Now that he was gone, she said, I would have all of her. "Are you really willing to throw away 20 incredible years over this?" Her voice trembled. "Did what we had mean so little to you?" "No," I stated with unwavering resolve. "It's because our love meant so much to me that I can't stay in this marriage. You didn't just win my heart. You deceived me to claim it. How am I supposed to see that as anything other than a complete betrayal? Trust is the foundation of a marriage, and you shattered it. You knew exactly what you were doing, yet you did it anyway. You got everything you wanted, Both of us, physically and emotionally. But I was never given a choice in the matter. Funny how no one offered me the same courtesy, the chance to share intimacy with someone else's wife. This divorce isn't a burden on my conscience. It's the result of your selfishness and deceit. Tears streamed down her face as she sobbed. I could never accept the idea of sharing you with another woman in any way. But the thought of you loving someone else? That would have destroyed me more than some meaningless fling ever could. You loved him, Nathan. You had a child with him. And the worst part? I had no clue. That doesn't make this okay. You and Daniel stole something from me. I leaned in slightly and in a calm, low voice said, It's probably a good thing Daniel died of a heart attack that day, because if he hadn't, I would have killed him myself. Olivia's breath hitched, her face draining of color as my words sank in. My own vision blurred with unshed tears. You know, I continued, my voice thick with emotion. Through all of this, you've never once said you regret what you did. You've apologized for hurting me. You're sorry you got caught. But deep down, I don't think you actually regret a damn thing. Nathan, don't do this, she pleaded. Please. Do your part. Don't go through with the divorce. I scoffed, shaking my head. My part. This was supposed to be our marriage, Olivia. Not yours, not mine, ours. It was supposed to be forever. Liam, my attorney, turned to Olivia's lawyer. I think we're finished here, he said firmly. Your client needs to sign the paperwork and return it. Olivia's attorney, a no-nonsense, middle-aged black woman, gave a curt nod and extended a hand for Liam to shake. We ironed out a few minor details, and 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. 2 days after the ink dried, Liam filed a lawsuit against Daniel's estate for financial support. Essentially child support and college expenses, though Liam made it sound far more sophisticated in legal terms. If Grace hadn't made it so painfully clear after the funeral that she wanted nothing to do with me, I probably wouldn't have gone that far. I had spent 18 years raising her as my own, and this was how she repaid me? The moment Olivia told her the truth, I became nothing more than a gullible idiot in her eyes. 14 years of fatherhood, erased overnight. So when Liam suggested that I replace lost respect with a solid payday, $1 million, to be exact, I didn't hesitate. His attitude about it made the decision even easier. I was expecting a call from Emily when, instead, Olivia's name popped up on my screen. I figured Emily had decided Olivia stood a better chance of softening me up. She was wrong. Are you struggling for money? Olivia asked the moment I answered. I smirked. Well, hello to you too, Mrs. Harrison. What a lovely surprise. My sarcasm wasn't lost on her. Do you realize how ridiculous this makes you look? She shot back. Do you realize, I countered, my voice turning cold, that I spent 18 years raising another man's child while you, Emily, and Daniel all had a good laugh at my expense? And now, that same child sees me as nothing more than a fool. I didn't care what any of them thought anymore. Without another word, I ended the call. I must have made my position clear because after Olivia tried and failed to negotiate with Liam, Emily just cut me a check for the full $1 million. A couple of months later, I found out why she didn't put up more of a fight. She had sold Horizon Group to a Japanese company for $8 million. Without Daniel around to run things, selling was probably the smartest move she could have made. That should have been the end of the story. But, as the old radio host Samuel Harvey used to say, now for the rest of the story. 2 days after Horizon Group was sold, I received a $2 million deposit into my offshore account in the Cayman Islands. That was my fee for helping Akari Solutions acquire the company. The deal had been in the works for months. If Nakatomi successfully acquired Horizon Group by a certain deadline, I would be compensated handsomely. If the deal fell through, I'd walk away with nothing. Now, you might be wondering what my role was in all of this. It's a little complicated. But before I explain, I have to admit, I wasn't entirely honest with you earlier. Most of what I've told you is true, But let's just say, some details could have been ripped straight from a Hollywood script. For about a month before Daniel's death, I was still playing the part of the clueless husband. And then, out of nowhere, a lawyer from Akari Solutions approached me with an interesting proposition. "We need your help acquiring Horizon Group," he said. I leaned back, feigning innocence. "And why exactly would you need me, aside from the obvious fact that my wife was Daniel's right-hand woman?" "Because we know you're sharp, and we believe you'll rise to the challenge and outsmart the man who's been betraying you for years," the lawyer said. To say I was stunned would be an understatement. Olivia had cheated on me, and this guy from Japan knew about it? Seriously? It turned out that Akari Solutions had done extensive research, leaving no stone unturned in their investigation. They had found out everything about Daniel and Olivia, as well as how Emily and the two daughters fit into the whole mess. They figured I would be more than willing to help, especially since I had a personal grudge, but they had to act fast. They were eyeing other companies, and the deal needed to be finalized in just 9 months. First, they showed me the evidence of Olivia's affair. They had photos, videos, phone records, travel receipts, you name it. They handed me everything I needed to destroy both of them, and then they made their offer. My salary was decent, so I didn't really need the money, but they offered me $2 million to help them take control of Daniel's company. Honestly, I would have helped them without a dime, but I wasn't about to tell them that. I just needed to make sure the money came after the divorce, so I wouldn't have to split it, given that we lived in a no-fault state. But before anything else, I had to keep my cool. I couldn't give myself away. My first instinct was to storm in the next day and shoot both of them, but I didn't want to spend the rest of my life as someone's prison buddy. So, I played it cool. I've been at this for 20 years, and a little more patience wouldn't hurt. I told Ari about Olivia and Daniel's affair, but I didn't go into detail about how I found out. One night, we stayed up late with a bottle of Don Julio tequila, throwing around ideas about what my next move should be. After we polished off half the bottle, Ari looked at me seriously and said, "Damn, Nathan, how messed up is it that the guy who invented Keitel puts up with his wife messing around with another man? You should have slipped her some of this stuff." That's when the light bulb went off. I didn't tell Ari, but in my head I thought, not for her, but I could slip some to him. I had a plan. You see, one of the good things about Keitel is that, unlike most medications, it doesn't have many side effects, except for one. This pill should never be taken by men because, while it calms a woman's libido, it raises blood pressure in men, which can be fatal. All I had to do was slip a few to Daniel. Daniel and I both played at the same golf course, and sometimes we'd get together with 2 other guys. I arranged for the 4 of us to play on the upcoming Saturday, with a lunch break after the first 9 holes. The first 9 went well, and we had about 90 minutes for lunch and drinks before tackling the back 9. I looked over at Daniel and casually said, "Hey, you feeling all right? You look a little worn out." The other 2 guys and I were about 10 years younger than Daniel, so my comment clearly made him self-conscious. I saw him starting to think about it. "No, just a little tired, but I'm fine," he replied. He didn't look tired to me, but I knew exactly how to play on his insecurities about being the oldest guy in the group. "I've got just the thing for you," I said, pulling out a small bag of unmarked white pills from my front pocket. I always kept some with me to help me get through the rest of the day after lunch. I handed him 5 pills. "Take these over the next few days. If you like them, I'll bring you more next time we play." Daniel popped 1 pill in his mouth, washed it down with his bourbon and ice, and then beat his chest like some kind of Tarzan. "Let's go, guys. I'm pumped," he shouted. For a minute or so, he probably felt pretty energized. His blood pressure spiking gave him a bit of a rush. Some athletes use heart pills to enhance performance, but too much can be dangerous. I gave him a small baggie instead of a bottle or box because I knew once he finished the pills, he'd toss it out instead of keeping it with him, where someone might find it. Now, for those keeping track, those 5 pills would last Daniel until Wednesday. That was the night Daniel would have his usual romantic rendezvous. Combining his already high blood pressure with an intimate encounter with someone other than his wife, along with the pills that raised his blood pressure even higher, could lead to a heart attack, likely fatal. But it would look like a normal heart attack, and with our small-town police force not exactly having a homicide unit, the only way they'd investigate would be if something seemed off. So I played the part of the cuckold perfectly, just like I had when I first found out about the affair a month earlier. I even impressed myself with my acting skills. 2 days after the money hit my account, I transferred it to another account. Then, I invited Ari and his wife to a fancy dinner, pretending it was to thank Ari for being such a great boss. The truth was, I had bigger plans and wanted to plant the seeds of my revenge. With Daniel gone, the bond between Olivia and Emily started to fray, especially after Emily realized Daniel had practically died on top of Olivia. I was told that Olivia's failure to convince me to drop my claim for child support against the estate really angered Emily, although she didn't know Olivia wasn't even getting that money because we were already divorced. Soon after, Emily fired Olivia, and rumors about the affair between Olivia and Daniel spread, effectively destroying her career in business administration. It's hard to recover when your boss dies while sleeping with you. Well, technically, on top of you. But don't feel too bad for Olivia. She won't be lining up at a soup kitchen anytime soon. She's got a daughter to help. Grace, her daughter, made it very clear to me after Daniel passed away that she wanted nothing to do with me. After all those years of raising her, coaching her soccer team, and attending her dance recitals, she turned her back on me more than once. I guess that's the price I pay for trying to be a father. Despite everything, I'm doing all right. Losing the love of my life after 20 years was tough, but I eventually started dating again. I'm just not sure I'll ever fully trust a woman again, and I don't know if I'll find one who matches what I thought I had with Olivia. But, hey, I'm worth about $5 million now. I retired early and now only work on projects for myself.